Podcast listeners, glad you're here, and videocast watchers, we're glad you're here too for the WatchPitch podcast and videocast. Our guest today is Kelly Campbell with the Asheville Investment Club. Very exciting interview that I'm looking forward to having and looking forward to learning some things about sort of the culture of investors and also just the mechanics of decision making when people decide, hey, I'm really excited about something that a startup or entrepreneur is doing enough to invest. So that's certainly one departure point that we'll cover. And I'm really excited that you're here. Maybe just to get us started, if you could tell us a little bit about yourself and also how you landed in this space in particular.
Yeah. That can be a pretty big question. So
yeah, well.
Tell us about yourself. So thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Pleasure.
It's been good to sit down. We've been here for the last, 20 minutes?
Yeah,
just like pretending like we're not getting ready for a podcast. We're like, everything's great. I love this coffee mug. This is awesome. So a little bit about me. I'm from Michigan originally. I tell people I'm from lakes and forests to sort of let them know I'm more of a rural person. I spent some time in Florida, and then I went up to New York for a long time. I've done everything at one point or another, it feels like, sort of in that path. But I've also mostly been focusing on businesses and on starting businesses up for the last couple of years.
So are you a startup? Have you been a startup also? You have. So great.
I've not actually started up my own business. I've helped other people along the way do a lot of startups. I find that I'm a better helper and I'm a better doer. I think the thing that I'm especially good at is sort of execution. I can get something from point A to point B pretty well. But I generally come in and assist.
I see.
Generally speaking, what happens for me is that I actually ended up in New York City for about 5 or 6 years. I was helping open bars, restaurants, high-end lounges, and stuff like that. So we would open those up and make sure they ran and did everything that you need to do to sort of keep that afloat. And then I moved into some investor relations from that point. I ended up sort of selling events for a while. I was leaving that space and sort of going out and doing some consulting / like helper work sort of things with different festivals and companies and so forth. There are CEOs that needed help getting things done, which everybody needs help doing.
Yes, that's true.
Anyway, so I had this sort of like separate life up in New York for a while, and then something sort of happened in me where I started seeing pictures of cabins, and I was like, I need to get out of here. So I have some family in Asheville. And I think I did what most people do, which is that they were like, I'm going to take sort of a hiatus and go to Asheville for a while and kind of like do some yoga and sit on a mountain and figure out what I'm doing. And I did all those things, and then I started to like find that there were some actual roots here, which is good.
Yeah.
So family brought me down here, and then business ended up keeping me here. When you're in that place of like being in between things, you end up having a lot of coffee meetings. I had a coffee meeting with a friend.
Right.
And you do this thing that I think most people who are at seams in their life do, which is that they say, I am good at all these things, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, right? And I'm interested in all these other things, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 20, 50, 80, 1,000. Yeah. And where do those things line up? And how can you actually find some traction in that to make it sustainable for yourself? So you start having meetings with other people, and you say, okay, like, here's my card. And my card is like the things I'm good at, the things that I want, and the things that I am interested in. Right, sort of like past, future, and present.
One card.
Yeah, exactly. You're like, this is my thing. This is my calling card. And they do the same thing, right? They're like, okay, so I'm all these things. I'm interested in these things, and these are the things I'm good at. And you sort of see where there's traction. I guess what ended up happening is that I found some traction with my now business partner, Dale Freudenberger, who had sold his company FLS Energy about 2 years before that. when you sell a company, you often have a non-compete for a while. So he was in that mode where he's out doing a lot of consulting and being a movable CEO, basically. So he was doing all the same things that I was doing, which was looking around and being like, what am I doing? And we joke a little bit that we sort of started as like accountability partners. We were like, all right, so
that's good.
did you get your stuff done?
Yeah, that's good.
Did you call your people?
That's
Don't forget
important,
to do this
right?
thing.
Almost like co-founders, essentially.
Almost like co-founders, which then grew into that, right? So we would meet at Odd's Cafe for the first long time. I feel like these little cafe centers in Asheville sort of became our fake offices for a long time.
Sure. Gosh, every startup knows what that's like.
Yeah, what you do.
Yes, right.
And what happened was there was actually something was on the table for us that was a business that we were looking at potentially buying. It was a summer camp, and they were excellent. You know, like we were really excited about sort of like the mission behind them and how they operated. And it turns out, I didn't know this before, and summer camps are actually can be extremely profitable. So that was sort of interesting to find out. And we spent the summer putting together a group of 12 people that would then have been the board had we actually followed through and bought the camp. And we diligenced that whole summer, and we spent a lot of time out there, which
fun.
Someone should have paid me for rather than the other way around, because it's so cool to be on a summer camp in the summer.
Nice.
And we learned a lot. And at the end of it, as these things happen sometimes, literally like days before we were ready to close it, something came out in diligence that we realized we were just too far apart from the then owners and what we were doing. And we had to sort of back out of that situation with so much respect for the people that were in there doing the job, and also the people who had owned it already. It's a good relationship still. It just didn't match up for what we needed.
But meanwhile,
so we were standing there,
right, with all these people.
Yeah. So suddenly we've got 12 people, and we've been meeting for every week on Friday, and we realized a couple things. We realized that, like, one, all of these people were founders or CEOs or COOs or CFOs or serial entrepreneurs who had all put their lifeblood into building businesses. And they were passionate about the way that you actually build those businesses and the prosperity in their own community, and the fact that, like, they felt that they were a part of Asheville, whether that's sort of a regional thing or a more localized thing. We also realized that we had capital that they were interested in putting back into local private investments.
So those are kind of the ethics around the actual
in many
investment
ways,
capital.
yeah. And then something crazy also started to happen, which is that group started to have a bit of a, like, I'll call it a gravitational force, but it's like nothing that dramatic, right? But something started to happen with that, where there was some gravity.
Well, you were connected.
And we did start to pull in things. So suddenly deals started to be brought to the group. And there was a bit of a natural evolution where we realized we had come together to do this one thing. And the one thing had actually been the vehicle to then do something larger.
Oh, fascinating.
Right? So the deal that we had thought we would do sort of disbanded and fell away. And what was left was actually this structure that we could then move from. So we had 12 people that then became the core group. It's as much social as it is profitable and business oriented. We tease sometimes that we mix business and pleasure just shamelessly, like we call ourselves a club. Like, it's kind of a club in a way. It's not we're not so exclusive as some clubs could be, but it's very interesting in that way. And so we built this thing, and pitches started to come to it, and we started to realize that we had the bandwidth to not just look at some of these companies, but to also look at how these companies could prosper. So through sort of all of that, and through actually kind of building the airplane while you're flying it, we found ourselves in a position where we had an investment club on our hands. And we were able to pull in people for different investments, depending on which one they were doing. And we're 9 months later, I'll call it 9 months, but it's sort of an ambiguous space. We deployed our first money at the end of 2018. So
okay.
I think it's like just
so you're
around
fresh,
Christmas time.
still
We're very fresh.
Yeah.
I remember like driving in my car to my family's home in Michigan for Christmas time, and we're like in a blizzard, and I have my cell phone out, hotspotting, and I'm like on my laptop. And I'm like arguing with my boyfriend. I'm like, I have to finish sending this out, So we're like finishing the last bits of like signing contracts and everything else. And I think we got it out on like the 27th or something like that
of December.
So just before the 2019 happened. But.
Well, I think fascinating story. And what I'm very curious about is kind of those tipping points that happen from your experience, because putting together 12 people who have on their own the success that they have had over time in their own sort of fields and expertise, to actually then create kind of the soil for them to be actually deciding to work together. That's a critical mass piece. And I'm wondering if you could point to whether it was a very specific event. Now, obviously, it did sound like this was fueled by, there was a deal, and now we're going to put everybody together for this deal. And it was a real estate deal. So that was sort of the bias of that along with the business. I don't know if you were actually planning to run you were going to run the business.
Well, yes and no. They have a very competent team that was on that business already.
I see.
So we would... generally, when we do come in, we probably put someone on a board, or we do often deploy people through a separate service company that we've created called Gray Matter.
I see.
So sometimes we'll put in a CFO or a COO or an accounting person.
Great. Very common, too, for investment groups. They're going to want to have somebody there on the board.
It's a good way to help bolster what they're doing and also to ensure that benchmarks are reached. Right. So we think of it as very much a win-win where...
sure. You're adding value. And they're obviously being accountable.
Yeah, and we're more hands-on, I think, than a lot of other investment places. I say places, but whether that's a firm or whatever.
Right. What I'm very curious about is in putting together those 12 people. What is it you think that they all have in common?
I think they all have shared goals in common, certainly. It's kind of a unique situation a bit here because the 12 people that we have as the core members, and then we have, let's say, half a dozen to a dozen, depending, for what we're calling sort of second-tier members. That core group came together out of friendship. A lot of these people, their kids went to school together.
I see.
And then they met working together or building their businesses. Like somewhere along the way, their paths intersected and they had some kind of kinship there. The way that we bring in new members is we invite them to one of our parties.
Right.
Sure. And we're like, do you want to come hang out? And usually hopefully they'll come if they can afford it. And
it's chemistry.
Not afford it, but if they can afford it in their schedule, excuse me.
I see.
It's time-wise. If they can make it happen, they'll come. And then we see if there's traction there, and like these are all good people who like, people say 3 Ps all the time, and I feel like it's probably a little overdone, but it's true in a lot of senses, right? It's like, they're interested in profit. We're interested in people. And we're interested in the planet too, right? For whatever that means. As
Triple bottom line.
Yeah, just keep it moving, keep it going. Keep support for sure. But I would say that there is something. It's not ineffable, right? I would say if we sat down to write out the mission statement of like each investor, it would probably line up. I would say as far as. They would like to, certainly the Asheville Investment Club, it's focused on profit. We are a for-profit entity. We are in this so that we can prosper as well as ensuring that the people that we are investing in also prosper. But we're also interested in how that reverberates out into our community as well. So making sure that that footprint is a responsible footprint as far as we want to make sure that anything that we are helping with is also helping to create a community that is constantly becoming more connected, more prosperous, more capable, more wide open. We're very interested in that as far as seeing that the areas that we consider home, right, whether that's Asheville or Swannanoa or Black Mountain, these are all areas that we touch on a very personal level, that like our families live in and children go to school in, and we're building homes in, and all these things. We're very interested in making sure that when we prosper, the places and the people that we love are also prospering. So I think that that's important.
Love that.
And also, like, we just want people who are honest, it's just important to like be able to have a mentality with people where you can sort of speak openly and honestly about things, and where you're able to connect to another person and be able to say, be able to have hard conversations over a beer, and I think that sort of thing is a little bit what might be kind of intangible. That's probably the reason that we say, come and let's see if we get along, Like I've heard this said in our group many times, like, I don't want to do business with someone unless I can have a beer with them. I want to be able to sit down and have a conversation with that person and know that if something, God forbid, were to ever go wrong in any capacity, either in business or in life, that's the kind of thing that we could sit down and talk through
over a beer,
right? Or a tea.
Sure.
If you don't drink, that's okay too.
Yeah.
But we are in Asheville. So
right.
That.
Well, I love that, because I think those principles of being connected in that way have got to apply not just in Asheville,
right?
In anywhere, on any continent where investors are investing in startups and entrepreneurs who want to be connected with them in a way where, this isn't about the show. This is about like our ability to connect with one another, have authentic conversations about what's working and what isn't, and also be fired up enough to go, this excites us as a group of investors enough to want to invite you to dinner or invite you to a cup of tea or coffee or a beer, and let's figure out if there's a fit here where we can complement one another, where, again, it's a win-win for everyone, but we're connected in a way where we can have these sorts of conversations, and we're not doing it from a boardroom.
Right.
Yeah, love that.
Yeah. And I would say, too, like, listening to you sort of talk that back to me, it's funny to hear you say it, because I would say it's also the way we approach our investors. I say our, but we're basically we are a member-run entity. So the investors ourselves, right? The way that we sort of connect to each other is also the way that we connect to the investments.
So no difference.
Not what it comes down to. Like, I want to know the investments that work really well for us, our investments where we can sit down over at 7:30 in the morning coffee, right? And be like, I've been up all night. We need to talk about this. Or have them texting us that, like, there's one investment that we had where, like, we had a tough meeting and we had to be pretty honest about some things that were, like, not going well, and we had a little bit of a come to Jesus, and we knew it went well because the following 24 hours we were receiving text messages of, like, bouncing ideas back and forth, like, up until 2 and 3 in the morning, right? Where it was like, we're trying to work this out. And of course, at that point it was like, we'll see in the morning, we'll have a coffee, we'll talk this through, right?
But it is too.
Yeah. But, like, that kind of synergy is important. Now, I should say too, like, certainly there are investments that we've done that we're not as hands-on. We have one investment in particular that's actually based out in Colorado, but that is Asheville connected.
I see.
And we are connected through them through one of the people who runs the board is actually in Asheville and very active, and we have a lot of respect for him, and we feel like what he's involved with, Asheville's involved with, and therefore we're interested.
Yeah, there's a lot of synergy, I think, between.
So, we're not too terribly involved with that one, but with most of our investments, I would say we want to make sure that we can sit down and talk and be honest and be able to work out things, whether they're working or not.
So important.
Yeah. It is important.
Yeah.
It's really important.
Well, what I love that you're about to launch into that I want to talk about with regards to your relationship to community, of course, is the Big Scary Fish Tank.
Big Scary Fish Tank.
Yeah.
Yes.
Love it. You've got to, listeners and viewers, absolutely check out the bigscaryfishtank.com. You'll find out about the pitch competition that's coming up, where you've committed to invest in, at least one of the winners, or maybe they're all winners because they're there. But what an amazing opportunity for you to welcome amazing ideas into the room, and to be able to create this really connected buzz around not only our Entrepreneurs Week that's coming up here in Asheville, but even just the focus of we want to invest in our community. And here is a platform where you can do that. You floated invitations out to the world, and you got quite a number of applications. And I don't want to get into the specifics of who's going to be there unless you want to announce that. But and the main thing is that what I love about that initiative was, and what I'm continually excited about is this commitment in the people who you have been looking at, that it is about community. It is about this combination of these people are doing something really exciting as a business, but they're also doing something that's really exciting for the community. And I love that lens, and that's not always a lens that many investors typically have on a potential investment. They may be just looking at that first P, or wherever you place it in the matrix, like, I want to be sure these guys are making profit. And, that community piece, not so much.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting too. And I promise to come back to it. I think you probably still have somewhere to go there. And
I'm wanting to explore this, and I'm very excited about this contest. So I do.
Yes, I am too. I'm very excited. And I'm very glad that we're talking about it.
Yeah,
so, but one point it just comes to mind when you say that. So it's interesting too, because we actually spent a minute when we did realize that we had Asheville Investment Club on our hands and we were going to figure this thing out. We actually brought someone in who's excellent at this, and we did like a branding session.
Nice.
Which I'm sure a lot of businesses do, right?
Very exciting.
Anytime you're starting a business, you're like, okay, what's our brand? What's our colors? The whole thing. We sat down and we were like, okay, well, we care about these things, and trying to figure this out. And one thing that really came to light that I think is so interesting, especially when you're talking about, like, a lot of investors do really just look at profit, which is so fine. And like,
they're investors.
So great,
Yeah.
Even the term invest, like to invest in something implies so much faith and trust and respect that it's like, that is not a small token. So I think it's really valuable to be able to just sort of press pause for a second and say, some people will invest for profit, but what they do with the profit that they make is what creates the like reverberations in their community as well. So like there are a lot, for instance, real estate, right? Like real estate is a time-honored, time-tested investment. It works, generally speaking. And there are so many great things about investing in real estate, psychologically, but also monetarily, right? Psychologically, it makes you feel connected to a place, which is important. But monetarily, it tends to do quite well, especially if you live in Asheville.
Right.
But can you say that there's like a community equalization to the profit there? In a sense, maybe, depending on where you're buying, et cetera, or who you're renting to, or who you're selling to, all those things, right?
True.
But I know a lot of people, for instance, who will invest in real estate, make quite a lot of money, and then actually go back and put that money into scholarship, into donation, right? Like a couple people I know put a great amount of like faith and trust and finance into something like the Leaf Festival, right? Which does exceptionally well.
Yeah.
And
it's an amazing community event.
And so like does an amazing job of like outreach globally, which is awesome.
It's true.
But you have to create the funds to be able to do that. And if you create the funds sort of separate than that, I think there's still so much value in being able to then put it back. So all that to say,
really good point.
Yeah, all that to say, I don't know. I have a lot of belief and faith in investors.
Mm-hmm.
As far as I really have come to see it as something that's pretty profound.
Mm-hmm.
You know, to take, right, like everyone can agree that like money isn't a real thing, right? Like numbers aren't technically real if you go far enough out, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But it's a value system.
Right.
So you create some value and you take that value and you believe enough in another person's value to merge values
Mm-hmm.
and to make something bigger, which is like a marriage of a kind, you know, which requires an immense leap of faith. And I think that in some ways is kind of spectacular.
Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of communication.
Yeah.
You know, like just...
It's hard work too.
Yeah, it is
That's the
hard
other thing,
work.
right?
Yeah, right.
It's not as much as like, you know, wish on your star, although you certainly should wish on stars. It's
Right.
also about like, do whatever you can, you know, keep a penny if you need to. But
Right.
that said, like, find people who you believe will do what it takes.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
you know, do what it takes for yourself as well.
So when it comes to character,
Yeah.
I would imagine there are some qualities that are critical. And then there are qualities which are forgivable. And then there are qualities that are unforgivable about, you know, the people you invest in.
Yeah.
You know, because people come in all shapes, sizes, and colors. And I'm curious if there are sort of non-starter qualities about people where it's like, yeah, you know what, we just could never go there with those kind of values.
Right.
And maybe even more importantly, what are the things that really work for you that you're noticing if you kind of do an inventory of your current investments? What are the qualities of those people, or even in the selections of the people for the big scary fish tank? Like, what is it about them where it's like, you know what, there's a lot here that we know we could work with. I'm curious, just in terms of for our listeners and our viewers, I think something that would be really valuable is to understand what are the qualities of a worthy investment in terms of people's character, or maybe it's just the way they run their operation, what the culture of their organization is. I know that's a big question, but I think if you could sort of sense like, yeah, these are the things that we really look for, I think that would be really helpful.
Yeah. It's interesting too, right? Because it's like you see companies at so many different stages.
Yeah.
So those things show themselves differently if you're like in idea stage, or if you're in
that's so
startup
smart.
stage, or if
Yeah.
you're in like
It's true.
much further along.
The
where
energy's
you've got-
completely different.
Yeah, it is. And technically speaking, generally, we usually come in just after like the valley of death, which is sort of affectionately referred to in the business community, right? It's like after once you've sort of become profitable, once you've got revenue, generally we come in about 700 to $1 million in revenue. The value of death is sort of like just after you've gotten done calling all of your like aunts and uncles and mothers and everyone else, you know.
Family and friends. Yeah.
And just before you reach generally a seed round, or not a seed round, excuse me, a Series A.
Yeah.
Now, there are exceptions to that, of course, right? But generally, we tend to see companies around that period. So it tends to look like you've got a handful of employees, usually one or two founders, right? And so you can start to see, usually there's some kind of a web presence, you know, generally like you start to see sort of indicators of success, but of like the beginning stages of it, right? Like it's not like walking into Apple, right? Like
Right.
it's
Yeah.
a very different thing,
Yeah.
which is great. But it's cool to be able to see the beginning and be like, is this what Apple looked like? You know, whatever.
Right.
Anyway, so something like if we're sitting down with someone who's in an earlier stage, who maybe isn't quite ready yet for a financial infusion, but who's starting that relationship. And there have been times that we have come in with companies that that don't fall into what we would technically refer to as like our area, right? But that looks like, right? Like if you're sitting down with an individual, you can't tell how they treat other people generally, right? You can't see like how they are able to delegate as well, right? If it's just one person. Like if we're sitting down with a team, if we know that there's 5 or 6 people here, we're interested in like, what does the delegation process actually look like? Are you able to write a list of things that you don't do and make sure that other people are on doing them? Do you have a clear and realistic vision for what the next 3 years looks like? And then 5 and out, please like expand and make it glorious. But generally speaking, people can't actually, people tend to underestimate what they can actually do in 3 years and overestimate what they can do in a year. That's someone else's thing. I've heard it somewhere, probably on a podcast. Right? But like 3 years is an important time frame and it's tangible. So like, is there a realistic understanding of what that looks like and how you get there? And is the team, because the team is really important, is the team capable of scaling or open and humble enough to bring in people who they will need in order to scale? And also meldable enough to be open to other opinions? Because like I've said before, we are fairly hands-on. We will put someone on a board more often than not, and often we'll deploy people into the company to help reach some of those goals. So we're interested in all those things, very much so. Now, if we sit down with an individual, oftentimes we have to find that in other ways, right? Like, do we have the sense that there's some honesty that we're able to like have initially and also build upon? And some of that is just like, can you honestly answer what your stress points are in your business?
Right. Yeah.
Do you really know? And you know, a non-starter in some of these conversations are if we sit down with someone who's got this like great, fabulous idea, who wants us to write a check so that they can quit their day job and pay their $60,000 a year salary. Like that's just not what investment is there for. You know, investment is there for exponential growth, certainly. But generally speaking, you know, some of the best founders that we've had either didn't take a salary, which is tough. You have to be in the right position to do that. You have to have a spouse, or you have to have something that brings in, right?
An exit from another business.
Yeah, you have to have something, right, in order to do this. But oftentimes, we have seen many times, you know, people who build really strong businesses are often more concerned about the growth of the business than they are about making sure that they're getting the like salaried job. And most entrepreneurs understand that there's a different curve, you know, where
you're bootstrapping. I mean, that's just...
You bootstrap, and you bootstrap because it's your baby.
Right.
Because you're growing this thing and you own it and it's yours. And the outcome could potentially be much, much higher than if you were working somewhere for $45,000 to $60,000 a year and were given health insurance and everything else, which is, listen, that is awesome.
Yeah, sure.
And there's some real security in all of that. And I have so much respect for the people who do that. But entrepreneurs are different creatures. You know, and oftentimes we'll see for the first 3 years or so, they'll say like, I'm taking this much out of what I need for the company, and it's essentially just to like pay the bills. And that's enough, you know, and we respect that very often because it's like all of our people were founders at one point and all of our people were CEOs and grew their own businesses. Literally every single person that's in our core group at least have done that. And they all know the value of doing that because they've done it themselves. So we would never ask anyone to do something or expect anyone to like be somewhere or have the outlook that we ourselves haven't already done and exhibited sort of in the world and believe in ultimately, because I think that there's a matter of sacrifice there. Like you have to know that we all live in Asheville, right? So we all love our lifestyle very, 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 very much. And it's important to maintain that, right? It's important to like be sacred about the time that you spend for yourself. But it's also important to make sure that that lifestyle doesn't overtake the time and the energy that you need in order to build this thing, because it is an immense undertaking. And it is in many ways I'm going to say this wrong. Herculean?
Yeah.
Herculean.
Yeah.
It's Herculean to build a business.
Yeah.
And so in the same way that we sort of know that, you know, you have to sit down across the table with someone and make a judgment call as to whether or not you believe that the person has like the strength, the integrity, the honesty, the humble humbleness. Oh man,
or humility. Yeah,
humility.
Yeah,
thank
sure,
you. The
yeah.
humility to really be able to do what is necessary to rise to the occasion. And the occasion, which is interesting, right? Because the occasion is actually what they set for themselves. So it's in them because they can see it and they've imagined it. But whether or not they're capable of seeing how they get there, what their strengths are in getting there, and also what their weaknesses are, so that they can bring in the people that are necessary to then support them in that ability to get there. That's just so important. And then I think I've said this before. I think a non-starter is you have to be transparent and honest. You really have to be, especially with people who are trusting you and investing in you, whether that's like their time or their money or their resources. Like, you need to be honest. So if there's something, and it will inevitably come out, right, in like the finances of the books or in agreements.
Any little level of diligence.
Yeah, because we're going to look at it.
Yeah.
We're going to look at all of it.
Right.
And you just have to be upfront, especially if there have been mistakes made. If there are things that you're unsure about, if there are things that like happened when you first started and didn't think about, or like, equity that you gave away that maybe you should have been more cautious about, there are things like that. Because how can you know? Because you can never know everything in the beginning. And there have been situations where we found ourselves in positions where we felt that the amount of transparency that we had been allotted was not enough. And in a situation like that, you have to walk away. Yeah, you just have.
It's a red flag. Yeah.
It's a red flag. You know, you just you have to know that you can trust someone. I know that sort of feels like the thing I just keep saying over and over.
No, but it's
it
core.
Really, accountability is huge. You know, like you need to find accountable people, and you need to behave accountably, because then people behave accountably towards you, and suddenly things work.
Now you get a relationship.
Suddenly you have a relationship there.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm very curious then. Yeah. There must have been some level of green flags on these current contestants that are going to be on the Big Scary Fish Tank. It's like, okay, you know what? There's a lot of green flags here.
So this was harder, right?
Because it was.
Usually I sit down with a person, and usually we'll sort of like, I'll sit down with someone and have coffee with them, and maybe it'll be just me, or maybe it'll be me and Dale for the first meeting. And then if it sort of makes sense, if like check all the boxes that we need at that particular time, then we'll either schedule like a call with both of us, both Dale and I, or we'll sit down with them again, and then we'll do like a mini diligence, and then we'll bring it to the group, and then, you know, things progress from there. But in a situation like this, so Big Scary Fish Tank, we announced it at A Million Cups of Coffee on June 26th. And we had about 2 months to find our pitches. So we announced, we're like, we're really interested. Anyone who's got something, throw it our way. Like, we just want to see it all. And we got a bunch of people. You know, I put up like a Wix website, you know. I just like, it's two of us, right?
You
so
did
like,
good.
I did everything I could do.
You did great. Yeah.
But huge shout out here, like Scott Nash with Nashbox over up in Maine with II Institute. That's Illustration Institute. He's an incredible illustrator. And he does children's illustration. Anyway, he did our logo.
Amazing.
It's amazing, right? It's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Love.
Yeah.
Anyway, so huge shout out for him. Nashbox. Anyone ever needs a logo or anything designer, you're writing a children's book, call Scott Nash.
Cool.
Anyway, so we're like totally bootstrapping this, right? And we announce it, and so I've got this thing on the website that's like an application, right? So the applications start coming in, which is really exciting. But we get like just what we've asked for, right? Which is, I get a website, I get some names, I get any kind of clues as to like who they've partnered with at all. I get a little bit of a description of like what the company really is, and then what their financial ask is. So like what their growth factor is, right? And that's a lot of stuff there are a lot of things in there that I don't get that I need, right? Which is like financials, right? To say nothing of financials, right? Yeah. So it's like, woof. But Big Scary Fish Tank in some ways is a little bit of an entity of its own, right? So like Asheville Investment Club is presenting Big Scary Fish Tank as a fundraiser for On Track WNC, as the capstone event for Asheville Entrepreneurship Week, in partnership with Venture Asheville, Million Cups of Coffee. You know what I mean? Like, it's this thing. Community,
yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Because so many times, like,
so great.
Being in the community, you meet all these people. Everybody's so passionate. Everyone's so interested. Everyone's doing such a good job in their niche. And everyone's talking about this right now. And I think it's so important that we are, is like, why aren't we actually, like, pooling and coming together and, like, making a thing unto itself? It's so important to be able to pass the ball.
Yeah.
You know? Anyway, so Big Scary Fish Tank serves a lot of purposes for us as Asheville Investment Club, right? First of all, we've flown very low under the radar, kind of on purpose, because first, we're very new, and second, I really believe in taking this very slow. People ask me, like, what our goals are for Asheville, and it's just like, to be honest with you, our goals are to slowly and consciously grow and become self-sustaining over the next year. You know, if we're in a very similar place as what we are now in a year, that will have been a success. You know, but I do believe, I think Warren Buffett says, like, investing is like, should be as exciting as watching paint dry. Like, it should not be dramatic, right, at all. It's a problem if it is, which is sort of ironic, because I'm like, Big Scary Fish Tank, it's just I'll get to that. But
a little more exciting than
But if the investing itself needs to be, there's a book that came out, I think maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago. Gosh, I'm probably wrong about that, but there's a book, and it came out, and I think it's called Thinking Slow, something fast. Shoot, terrible shout out.
Okay, we'll figure it out.
Footnote.
I'll put it in the notes.
It is what it is. It's a great book, but it's about, you need to slow down your thinking, because your intuitions, your sort of gut reactions are usually wrong.
Yeah.
You know, so you really have to slow it way down. So if that's the way we're investing, that's the way we need to grow as well, I believe. So to back that up to what our actual question here was, Big Scary Fish Tank, because we're taking our time with this, is also our first sort of engagement with the community. You know, it's essentially our sort of coming out party, right? It's our ability to say, like, hello, Asheville. We are Asheville Investment Club, and it's we're a resource here, and this is what we're doing as well, you know? So there's a bit of celebration in that. It's funny, when we first got together with the investors, we started to do this, like, everyone just say the words that they're interested in, right? The things that we care about, right? And one thing I haven't talked about that is actually something that we talked a lot about is the word fun.
Yeah.
We were like, God, we just want to have some fun.
So that was one of the words that kept coming up.
Oh my God, over and over and over and over and over. We're just like, can we please have some, like, make this fun?
Nice.
And that's important.
Yeah.
You know, like, something profound happens when you're, like, in a place of play. It's surprising.
Yeah.
It's
so important. It's
so
such an engine. Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
So anyway, so we're really interested in fun, right? So Big Scary Fish Tank is supposed to be fun. It's also supposed to, like, connect community, and it's also supposed to make money for On Track, because it's a fundraiser. On Track is incredible. And it's also supposed to serve the purpose of actually investing as well, right? Like, we put a pause on all of our investments from the spring until now. We're saying, like, all right, so any money that we would normally be investing during that time, we're not going to deploy anything until Big Scary Fish Tank, so that we can let this be an event.
Awesome.
Which is, we're really excited about. You know,
That's
we have a
great.
pool of $500,000, so it's $500,000 that we're going to put towards local businesses in Nashville. So when I'm looking at these pitches that are coming through, it's complicated.
Right.
You know, and it's hard too, because there are so many cool things that people are doing.
I'll bet.
You know, and there were so many that were so worth anyone's time. But there are things that we needed to consider when we're putting together right? That means, like, if you have one person that's doing X, Y, or Z, you can't have another person that's doing something super similar to X, Y. So it's like something nuanced like that, where it's like,
I see.
We'd love to look at this, but probably not for this event, right? So I sent a lot of emails out, and some of those emails were, you know, we think what you're doing is awesome, but stay in contact, and it's probably later on. If it exists, it might be later. You know, with the caveat, of course, that, like, we didn't have the chance with Big Scary Fish Tank to do the diligence in the beginning that we wanted to really have done. Well, we do have a little bit of leeway there too, because what will happen is we've gotten a lot of information from a lot of these people.
Right.
Some of them we were able to really sit down with, some of these that we really needed to have more of a conversation with about the stuff that they sent in, right? So that looks like certain projections we were able to have, certain amount of diligence that did need to get done. We were able to vet out, we were able to carve out some space for some of those for sure. But it was a process of like going through different cullings. You know, it's like, all right, so it's not this group, it might be this group, it might be this group, it might be this group. And in the end, we found 4 companies that we believe in the teams. We really think that the founders who are running it are people who not just have vision, but who have the chutzpah to be able to achieve that vision, who have the experience necessary, who have the humility to be able to acknowledge where they need assistance, and who are doing things that we feel are impactful, important, forward-thinking, intelligent with their money as well. As a huge part of this is also like, is it responsible? And also fun. You know, like I think each one of the people that we've chosen, there is an element of like joy in what they're doing, which I think is super important.
Yeah.
Because there are days that it's tough, and there are days that it's hard. There are months where it's challenging, and you need to be able to find like whatever it is that made you believe that this thing was worth giving your life to it.
So true.
So it was hard because there were a lot of awesome people. But Big Scary Fish Tank is going to happen, and there are 4 pitches, and everyone can visit the website, www.bigscaryfishtank.com. I almost fell out of my chair when I realized I could have that domain.
That is pretty cool.
But I have the domain, which is great. We have Instagram, we have Facebook. I'm not much of a marketing person either. So like, please like us and follow us. I don't have any tricks up my sleeve to make people do that. So
watch pitches in your corner too to promote that as well.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Happy to.
And can I say what our pitches are?
Yes, absolutely. Sure.
Okay. All right.
Drum roll.
All right. So we have 4 pitches for September 6th. Our MC is going to be there as well to be introducing these along with our sponsors and so forth. But our 4 pitches are we're going to be showcasing Just Kibitz, which is fabulous. I don't think I'm going to waste too much time going through each one, but they're all really exceptional. You should check out our website and see what they do. They're so cool. MS Lean Landscaping, which will also be sort of looped into a company that there's sort of foresight for within MS Lean, and that is called Under the Hood, which is a great future company. Nice. And then we're also doing Range Urgent Care, which is a fabulous place. If you ever have urgent care needs, go there. And a new one that's kind of coming up on the Asheville scene that we're really excited to let Asheville start talking about, and also to see ourselves a little bit more, is ZAVL. Super fun, really interesting concept, something that's been vetted out a couple times. I don't know if you know Meow Wolf at all.
Oh, absolutely.
There's Meow Wolf that has been massively successful. Yes. And we really think that it could be a really good fit for Asheville. We haven't done the full scope of it yet, of course, and they haven't pitched yet. But regardless, we're super excited about all 4 of these pitches.
Wow.
And all 4 of these teams are just excellent. So they're in training right now. We've got 2 weeks of training that we're doing with Venture Asheville, who we obviously trust implicitly for that. We're very excited about it. And, you know, we're 2.5 weeks away. So September 6th,
so exciting.
We'll have this like big, awesome event. Oh, and can I just talk really quickly? So Big Scary Fish Tank is awesome because that first hour, just the event itself, right? We've talked about like how great the concept is, and I do think it's great, right? Like, it kind of sucks that I'm like tooting my own horn here, but no, I think it's awesome. It's an awesome thing. Yeah. It's awesome just for everybody.
Yeah, I think it's
part of the reason I'm so pumped about it though is because it's so much fun. So that first hour is networking, certainly, right? Investors, entrepreneurs, politicians, like community. Like we want everyone there for sure. but it's like the food is being done by 67 Biltmore, which is awesome. They do such a great job.
Yes.
Noble's new venture, the Greenhouse, which if you haven't been, is such delicious food.
Love the outdoor cafe.
Yes, yes. So they're doing a bunch of these excellent desserts for us. Oh my gosh, delicious. Like their pastry chef is out of this world crazy good.
That's great.
So they're doing desserts for us. They're going to be there, and then they're also doing a pop-up bar for us too. So obviously we'll have Noble Cider there.
Nice.
Pubcore, which is this great thing that's happening in the community too. Everyone check out Pubcore. They're going to have a Pubcore beer there. And the cocktail bar is going to be there as well. Everyone get 2 tokens with their tickets, so that'll be fun.
Nice.
And we'll have 2 different cocktails, especially
signature
signature cocktails.
Nice.
That's going to come from the Greenhouse. And then during that first hour as well, this is so cool. So we're having it at the Masonic Temple on that 3rd floor,
right?
Which has that just
amazing building,
drop dead gorgeous 100-year-old theater in there, right? So that first hour in the theater, Better Than Unicorns, which is a VR company in town, is going to be doing a VR experience in that theater, which is so cool for people to be able to do.
That's great.
Right. And then in the front room, Venture Asheville is actually going to be doing this like great carnival game where you can actually win goldfish. So that's going to be super fun.
That's
so
great.
it's just like food and drink and games. We're also doing, so it's a fundraiser, right?
Yes.
So we're calling it like Buy Your Vote, basically. And the idea is that for every $10 that you donate to On Track on the night of the event, you'll get 1 vote or 1 little plastic fish. There will be 4 large fish bowls, each one representing each of the 4 pitches. Whoever gets the most vote for the night will actually receive a essentially like as a people's choice, right? It's like an audience award for a certain amount of investment, right? So the audience then can be like involved as well,
contributing as investors.
Voting.
Yeah,
exactly.
sure.
Right. So we just really want to encourage people to like get out, even if you're not an entrepreneur, right? Even if you don't care really about like the business, it's just going to be this like fun, exciting evening, and I just can't wait to share it with everyone. And it's a good thing to do on a Friday night.
Yeah, sounds fantastic, Kelly. So, is there anything else that you would like to say as an investor, collaborator, to our listeners in closing that you didn't say that is important to know whenever somebody's reaching out to an investor? What I love is that you've really touched upon some really key qualities of people that need to just be in place in order to even start that conversation.
Sure.
And I just want to, create some open space to...
It's a totally fair question.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a totally fair question. I'm just thinking this through. Anytime someone asks you something like that, you're like, okay, what's the most important?
I don't know that the most important, because you've really, communicated some really valuable insights into this space.
It's okay. I think it's important to note, though, like, it's good. Anytime you so generally when you have an investment, it's usually for equity in your company. And sometimes it'll be some kind of a loan, right? But usually it's equity. It makes the most sense. It has the most payoff for the investors, and it's there's a feeling of coming together that happens with equity. I think there's something psychologically that's important in that. I would say, so equity is also the most expensive money you're ever going to spend, too. It's not something at all to take lightly. And I don't often see entrepreneurs, to be fair, who are looking for investment lightly. But it is important, I think, for everybody when they start to think about investing and investments to really spend some time there, because And to also make sure that the people that they are investing with are the people that they want to bring along in that journey with them too, because there's going to be tough times.
Like to the distance, yeah.
To the distance,
yeah.
you know? And I'm often surprised actually by how little of a conversation I sometimes have with investments that are looking for money about who we are and what our involvement will really look like, and if that's something that they're really open to, you know? No one wants to be in a position, especially as an investor, who's going to come in and sort of say like, well, you're listening to me because I'm sort of the muscle behind this, right? Like that's never a position that anyone should be in. And I don't think it very often is, to be fair. I think that people are much more accountable than that. But, oftentimes when we say no to a company, it often has very little to do with the company and has more to do with us. Where it's like some companies we believe in, but we don't think we totally understand it, right? We don't think we totally have a grasp on like what they need. And we think that there's money out there that could take the same amount of equity, but actually be much better for that company in the long run. And I think that that's just about being wise. You need to be wise in knowing certainly like what your financial return is going to be.
Sure.
But also on like, there are some companies that we haven't invested in because we know that they could be exponentially better than what our money could make them. So that's important for investments and for entrepreneurs to consider as well. Is like being able to identify what it is that they need, who they want to collaborate with, and take their time with it too. I encourage people to start a relationship with us. It's better that we know you before you're looking for money even than it is to sort of try and squeeze it all in right away. Now, to be fair, nobody has a huge amount of bandwidth, I'm sure. Like everyone's very, very busy, right? So we don't necessarily have time to like make a weekly coffee date, but we would be able to make time for keeping you on our radar, knowing you, like if there are updates that we should know about, keep us in the mix there. Certainly I think it is about being able to figure out who the best fit is for everyone along the way. We sort of joked when we started AIC that we wanted to call it like accelerate, incubate, create, so that we could switch around the three words and call it CIA, not that one. Right?
That sounds fun.
It sounds fun, right?
Yeah,
it was fun.
right, yeah.
But we looked around and we were like, we're not there are so many people in this community accelerating and incubating, and they do awesome job at it, right? So we're like, back off, AIC. They're like, let's not do that because it's not our place to do that, right? But like there is a place for what we do, which is very different, right? But for instance, like when you're looking at investors, there are lots of options out there, right?
Yeah.
Like even someone like the Asheville Angels, which is Venture South, right? They do an awesome job. They're very different than us.
Right.
We do things very differently, and we have different things we're trying to achieve too. That said, they're a great option for a lot of people. So, we're interested in talking to businesses and entrepreneurs. Certainly, we're always interested in talking to investors as well. As far as we would love to find more and more people to expand our network. There are some limitations, of course, to at least joining like the core group and the second tier. Like to be a core group member, you need to be an accredited investor, which is an important benchmark just for our taxes and making sure that the legal entities at B still like us. But as you extend out, like we have hopes to eventually create sort of a third tier investment group, which would be someone who could come in for like 10 to 15,000 a year. Maybe it's 15 to 20, hasn't fully been built out yet, right? Who could then come in under sort of CPA umbrella, which would mean that we would put together a diligence package, the CPA would sort of sign off on our PPM, and then they would fall under the umbrella. Anyway, so we are really interested in being able to reach as many as possible and sort of group people in, but we're very focused on local private equity. So, all right, so can I sum that up?
Here's what I hear, because what I love is that what you're saying out loud that I think that is often missed by entrepreneurs or anybody looking for investors is it is not just about the money.
Yeah.
It is about understanding who your investors are, what their affinities are. What are the verbs that they're going to be bringing into your culture as a business, and make sure that's a fit, because I think it's very easy for a hungry entrepreneur or startup who's looking for capital, who wants to take their business to the next level, to want to go after, a group or an individual for just the money. What I'm hearing is that if you don't know who you are as an investor, and that's not clear to the entrepreneur, then that's just going to be really messy. And there are actually investors who know themselves very well and who know what they are looking for and know what the sweet spot is. And those are the investors to look for. Like, this is about, I think, as much vetting by the entrepreneur and startup as it is for the investors to also be vetting those opportunities.
Yeah, I think I would encourage entrepreneurs to actually think they are investors.
Yeah.
They're investors in their business.
Right.
It's interesting. This just occurs to me. I think money, right, has sort of a dirty implication at this point. And I think it's actually really useful to think about money in a much more expansive way.
Yeah.
Right? Yes, money gets transferred by paper or check or electronically, right? But money is an indicator of an intense amount of restraint and respect when given to another person, and trust and hard work, right? So I don't know. I'm hesitant to say this, but I feel like I should say this, but I'm afraid it will get pulled out of context, right? But I actually think it is about the money when you consider that money is something that is profound and deep and actually just an indicator of people's passion and accountability and trust and respect and their investment in their future and also their community and in the people they care about, and it just keeps bubbling out from there, right? That money is a thing that can actually encompass all of that.
It's true. Yeah.
I believe.
Yeah.
I hope.
Yeah. No, I think you're right.
Now, certainly you can handle it wrong, right? There are a lot of people I don't want to hand over all of those tools to.
Right.
But there are ways to be good shepherds of money and for it to do great good.
I agree. Kelly, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I really appreciate this time. And for people wanting to find out more about the Big Scary Fish Tank, they can go to bigscaryfishtank.com. And if people wanted to reach out to the Asheville Investment Club, can they do that? And if so, what's the best approach?
Yeah, definitely. My email is actually on bigscaryfishtank.com.
Okay.
Buy tickets. Come see us that night, too, also. If you're listening to this and you want to come to Big Scary Fish Tank, we do really well just mingling. So come and have a drink with us. The first two are on us.
Oh, that's great.
And introduce yourself. Let's talk.
All right. Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you.
All right.